The United States, despite being a global economic powerhouse, relies heavily on imports in many key areas that are essential for its continued prosperity. From raw materials and energy to food, beverages, and skilled labor, the U.S. economy is deeply integrated into international trade. This has been true for decades, with global commerce acting as a cornerstone of the country's economic stability. However, the dynamic of U.S. imports has been increasingly questioned under the leadership of President Donald Trump and his America First policy. Trump's administration took a strong stance in favor of reducing reliance on foreign goods, introducing tariffs and trade restrictions targeting not only rivals but also allies, such as Canada, the European Union, and China. The goal was to shift the balance of trade to favor domestic production, appealing to nationalist sentiments and aiming to safeguard American industries. While these policies found support among those advocating for stronger domestic manufacturing, they overlooked the complex, interconnected nature of global trade that the U.S. economy is built upon. The reality is that the U.S. depends on foreign imports for much more than just consumer goods. Essential resources, including crude oil, rare earth metals, and natural gas, are imported from other countries to fuel its energy needs and support key sectors, such as technology and defense. Additionally, foreign talent, skilled labor, and innovative minds is crucial to maintaining the nation's competitive edge in the global economy. One consequence of Trump's tariffs is that Canada, as a significant trade partner, is now considering its own retaliatory measures. These could go far beyond simple counter-tariffs. Given Canada's vital role in supplying energy and natural resources, its response could deeply affect the U.S. For instance, Canada could restrict its exports of oil and electricity, which would disrupt the American energy supply chain, given that Canada is the largest energy exporter to the U.S. In fact, in 2024, the U.S. imported $129.5 billion worth of energy from Canada, including oil, natural gas, electricity, and uranium. In the face of a proposed 25% tariff on Canadian goods, Canada is considering a range of counteractions. Ontario, for example, is weighing the possibility of halting electricity exports to the United States, particularly to states like Michigan, New York, and Minnesota, which rely on Canadian power. A significant portion of New York's electricity, about 21% during peak periods, comes from Ontario. Cutting off these supplies could affect millions of American homes and increase energy prices, especially during high-demand seasons like winter and summer. Ontario is also considering other responses, such as barring U.S.-made alcohol from its markets and imposing stricter controls on key minerals. Products like bourbon, whiskey, and American craft beer, which are popular in Canadian markets, could be targeted. The total value of American whiskey exports to Canada exceeded $154 million in 2022, with Ontario being the largest buyer. Banning or restricting these exports would hurt U.S. distilleries and breweries that depend on Canadian demand. On a broader scale, Canada is considering imposing tariffs on a wide variety of U.S. goods. This is similar to the measures taken in 2018 when Canada retaliated with $16.6 billion CAD, $12.6 billion USD worth of tariffs. The current list of targeted goods could include steel and aluminum products, agricultural products like pork, apples, and dairy, and essential raw materials used in various industries across the U.S. Canada is the second largest supplier of critical minerals, such as cobalt, nickel, and lithium, to the U.S., contributing about 25% of imports of these materials. These minerals are crucial for producing batteries and electric vehicles, among other technologies. Limiting or taxing these exports could cause serious disruptions in U.S. industries reliant on Canadian resources. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has also suggested a more drastic move, restricting electricity exports to the U.S. This move could severely impact the power grid of states like Michigan, New York, and Minnesota. In 2023, Ontario exported nearly 7,000 gigawatt-hours of electricity to the U.S. New York alone imported 21% of its electricity from Ontario, highlighting the critical role Canada plays in ensuring reliable energy for many regions. A disruption in this supply could cause instability and higher costs for millions of American consumers. Canada is also contemplating excluding U.S. companies from bidding on Canadian government contracts, a move that would impact industries such as construction, technology, and defense, where American firms have a strong presence. With over 200 billion CAD in government procurement spending annually, such a decision would shift contracts to domestic or other international suppliers. This would not only affect American businesses, but also provide a boost to Canadian industries and align with the country's Buy Canadian strategy. In response to U.S. concerns over illegal immigration and drug trafficking, Canada is considering increasing its investment in border security. Over $1 billion CAD could be directed towards enhancing surveillance, staffing, and the creation of a joint task force with U.S. agencies. This strategy would address U.S. security concerns while demonstrating Canada's commitment to bilateral cooperation on shared issues. Turning to the specifics of energy imports, the U.S. continues to rely heavily on foreign supplies, even as it increases its domestic energy production. Crude oil imports, particularly from Canada, play a critical role in meeting the country's energy demands. In 2024, the U.S. imported approximately 6.1 million barrels per day of crude oil, with Canada supplying about 67% of that amount. Most of this oil is transported via major pipelines like the Keystone XL and Enbridge Mainline, underscoring Canada's importance to the U.S. energy supply. Beyond crude oil, the U.S. also imports substantial amounts of refined petroleum products, including gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. These imports are especially important for regions like the East Coast, where refining capacity is limited. Additionally, the U.S. imports natural gas from Canada, which is crucial for heating and power generation in the Northeast, particularly during the winter months. Canada's natural gas exports, amounting to 7.4 billion cubic feet per day, ensure reliable energy availability and price stability in the U.S. In conclusion, while the America First policy might aim to reduce dependency on foreign trade, the reality is that the U.S. and its closest trade partners, such as Canada, are deeply interdependent. Trade restrictions, tariffs, and retaliatory measures could have wide-ranging consequences, especially in sectors like energy, technology, and defense, where cross-border exchanges are vital. In 2024, to manage rising energy demands and occasional domestic supply limitations, the United States imported around 38.92 terawatt-hours (TUE) of electricity. More than 95% of this came from Canada, with hydropower being the primary source, making it a reliable and environmentally friendly option. The rest came from Mexico, which provided energy to regions along the U.S.-Mexico border. States like New York and Michigan were notably reliant on Canadian electricity, with New York importing about 21% of its energy from Ontario. These imports played a crucial role during extreme weather events, helping to prevent blackouts and maintain grid stability when domestic power sources were stretched thin. Meanwhile, coal imports accounted for less than 1% of the U.S.'s energy imports in 2024, with about 4 million short tons of coal arriving primarily from Colombia, Indonesia, and Australia, used mostly for industrial purposes like steel production. Additionally, uranium imports were essential to fuel the U.S.'s 93 nuclear reactors, which together provided around 20% of the nation's electricity. The U.S. imported roughly 50 million pounds of uranium in 2024, primarily from Canada, Kazakhstan, and Australia. However, following the 2024 U.S. ban on Russian uranium imports, which previously supplied 27% of the enriched uranium used by U.S. reactors, the U.S. is now seeking alternative suppliers and increasing its focus on domestic uranium enrichment. Let's take a quick break. If you're enjoying this content, we'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button. It helps us reach more viewers. And feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for sticking with us. Turning to oil, Canada is currently weighing its response to potential U.S. tariffs on Canadian oil. One option under consideration is halting or reducing oil exports to the U.S., which could have wide-reaching consequences for both nations. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has suggested using energy as leverage, including suspending electricity exports to the U.S., which could affect up to 1.5 million American consumers, especially in energy-dependent states like Michigan and Wisconsin. However, Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, opposes cutting oil exports, arguing it would severely harm Canada's economy, as Alberta is the largest producer of crude oil sent to the U.S. Smith has warned that such a move could destabilize Canada's energy sector, leading to job losses and economic turmoil. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has advocated for a more cautious approach, considering alternative measures such as tariffs on U.S. goods like steel and aluminum, in a bid to protect Canada's economy without escalating tensions further. In response to these economic challenges, Premier Ford announced a snap election set for February 27th, framing it as an opportunity to secure a mandate for dealing with U.S. tariffs. Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre, who is also a strong contender to succeed Trudeau, has vowed to retaliate against the U.S. should the tariffs go through. He has emphasized that such tariffs could harm both countries, and has suggested seeking new trading partners to reduce Canada's reliance on the U.S. market. Meanwhile, a grassroots movement emerged in Canada with an Ottawa entrepreneur creating "Canada is not for sale" hats in response to former President Trump's tariff threats. These hats gained significant attention after Premier Ford wore one in a meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau, leading to a surge in orders and sparking a national conversation on Canada's economic sovereignty. Economically, the proposed tariffs have led to a strengthening of the Canadian dollar, with the loonie rising 0.2% against the US dollar, reflecting investor uncertainty about the tariffs' impact. Political unity in Canada has been notable, with provincial leaders from various political parties standing together to oppose the tariffs and support retaliatory measures. If Canada were to cut oil exports to the US, the economic ramifications would be severe for both countries. For the US, it would disrupt energy supply chains, particularly in states like Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, which depend on Canadian crude oil and electricity. These states would likely face shortages and higher energy costs, with significant ripple effects throughout the US economy. For Canada, the economic toll would also be substantial. Crude oil exports are a major revenue source, and a reduction could stifle GDP growth, increase unemployment, and put pressure on provincial budgets, particularly in Alberta. The political fallout could also be significant, potentially straining US-Canada relations and complicating trade negotiations under the USMCA agreement. Meanwhile, Mexico is considering its own retaliatory measures in response to US tariffs, particularly a proposed 25% tariff aimed at reducing migrant arrivals and the flow of synthetic fentanyl into the US. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has indicated that Mexico may impose tariffs on US goods, potentially escalating tensions further between the two nations. Additionally, Mexico is looking at ways to reduce its trade deficit and strengthen its economy by fostering domestic production and attracting foreign investment. Initiatives such as the Mexico Plan focus on growing sectors like automotive and aerospace, making the country less dependent on imports. The economic consequences of the proposed US tariffs on Mexico could be significant, with estimates suggesting that they could lead to the loss of approximately 400,000 US jobs, particularly in industries like automotive manufacturing that are highly integrated between the two countries. In conclusion, if Canada decides to cut off electricity exports to the US, it would have far-reaching implications for both nations. Canada plays a crucial role in maintaining the reliability of the US energy grid, particularly in regions like the Northeast and Midwest. Any reduction in electricity imports would lead to higher energy prices, supply shortages, and potentially even power outages. For US consumers, rising electricity prices could strain household budgets, especially in regions reliant on Canadian power. The disruption could also lead to increased operational costs for industries like manufacturing and technology, slowing down economic growth and potentially increasing inflation. For Canada, such actions could harm the economy and undermine the country's economic relationship with the US. Any major disruption in energy exports could destabilize the North American energy market, affecting both nations' long-term economic outlook. That's it for today's video. We hope you found this discussion informative. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe to stay updated with our future content. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again soon.